Back to this Wednesday evening, and we're talking about the stress, the fear factor of being outside your comfort zone, I guess. We've all of us had to do something, be it an exam, make a speech, a driving test. Maybe it was to get a qualification in the workplace, that pressure to perform. Well, we've got some tips now on how to maximise your potential, how to be yourself, how to maybe harness that adrenaline. Embrace the fear even. At some point, we've all been through this. The feeling, if you have, never leaves you. But hopefully, over the next quarter of an hour or so, we might hear some tips on how to make that whole process a little easier. Maybe a piece of advice to just take away some of the pressure. Think about it in a different way. Because, I'm pleased to say, joining us live this Wednesday evening is a man who's helped people of all kinds from all over the world in various situations. Ross McWilliam, good evening, isn't it? Ross, good evening.
Good evening, Brett. Nice to be on your show.
Nice to have you as well. You're a life coach. Are you happy with that term?
I get called lots of different things, mental health, life coach, performance enhancer. It doesn't matter. As long as the results are good and people perform better in life, then I'm happy.
It sounds as if it's quite broad then, what you do. You're there to help.
Yeah, and I always think about that myself. I'm a specialist, I'm a generalist, and I get most of my enjoyment from helping a variety of people from a variety of backgrounds. So in a stricter sense, I'm a generalist, I appeal to lots of people, but I use sound principles and practices which I've developed over the years to help people improve their lives.
And we'll explore some of those as well. And I've mentioned here, you've helped all kinds of people in all different situations right around the world. You can help everyone. Is that overstating the claim, or is that true?
No, I can bring something to the table, but somebody at that table's got to bring something to me. So it's a two-way partnership, and it's all about many things, but essentially there's got to be an intrinsic motivation to change.
We began talking about this in the production area a couple of weeks ago, off the back of one of our colleagues going on a training course and there being exams at the end of it. And I think that's probably a good way to begin, isn't it? Because it is a universal experience, and maybe the fear, the sleepless nights, the worry of an exam, even if it was decades ago, that never quite leaves you, does it?
It doesn't. It could, mentally scar you for a number of years, if not for some people, a lifetime. But I think once you start to break it down and look at what's involved, then you can start to understand it better. I sometimes work back with people, and I say to them, rather than being scared of this exam, what if you're actually looking forward to it? Look at it as a chance to show people what you know and what you can do. And that's a very good starting point. Because if you can do that, then you can think about then the next part of the jigsaw is what's happening in our brains. And there's two fundamental parts to the brain that affect our observations of exams and how we're going to do. The first one's the amygdala, and that is very much influenced by chemicals which you've heard of, adrenaline and cortisol, performance hormones. But if we get too much of this too soon, we get that panic feeling. When we get the panic feeling, we can't recall facts and information. And this relates to the second part of the brain, the hippocampus. This is all to do with motivation and memory. So if you're motivated and you've got the why am I doing this? It means that your memory is going to work better. And if your memory is working better, you're going to probably remember things better, retrieve the information, perform better, which means the amygdala will be nice and calm.
That does make a lot of sense, because when I'm reminded of being in that situation, being an exam or maybe a job interview, there does seem to be a lot of energy, a lot of frenzied energy on the build-up to it and in the moment as well. And people say, oh, that's negative energy, and it does sometimes feel as if it's a downward spiral. What you're saying is own it and flip it.
Yeah, some psychologists will tell you, it's about the practice, it's about the practices you use. And then when you get to the exam, you quite enjoy it. Well, I'll take it a step further. I'll say that not only will you enjoy it, you'll need to do it again and again, because this defines you. The ability to produce the goods on a certain day at a certain time, it's a bit of a buzz with it, rather than being the buzz affecting you.
And there is a training element, muscle memory, isn't there, to the brain in all of this? Because looking back personally, you can always see, oftentimes it's the build-up to an event that is far worse than the event itself, be it an exam or a speech in front of people. And if you can go into that with a different perspective, then it's not so odorous for the month beforehand.
Absolutely. We tend to look at things and catastrophize them. So we think it's going to be terrible, then it's going to be really bad. And generally speaking, as you said, the closer we get, the worse that catastrophization feels. And just being aware of that as a process, you're in the driving seat straight away. But there are practical things you can do to stop that acceleration into like an exam crash that's going to happen. And, there are some basic things that I've done with many, 1,500 schools over the years. And the first one is just about being organised. Know where your information is. Put your hands in it. Get it quickly so you're not worrying about getting something or using an excuse because you can't find it. Using previous questions, which is a very smart way of going through it, but using somebody like a study buddy to challenge you on that, to make sure you can do it. And if you look at one of the best persons in terms of acting, Michael Caine, he said you've got to practice, but you've got to really make sure as if it's the exam. Don't just think, well, it's exam next week, I'll just do a little bit here. Take it seriously, get someone to test you, and be very strict with you. Create those conditions that you're going to experience in the hall, wherever the exam is. And the last thing that I learned, because I failed all my exams at school, and since that day, when I was 16 and now 60, I've passed every single exam. I'm not supersonically clever, but I'm well organised. I look at previous questions, but what I do know is how I learn best. And some people learn best by seeing something, somebody by hearing something, and people like myself from the kinesthetic feel of doing something, that feedback that comes to me. So I practice, feedback, remember, practice again. So I've understood how I learn best.
We're going to play a short song, then we're going to come back and talk, as you've alluded to there, a few knockbacks along the way, but that has made you who you are. And that's life experience you're passing on now through the airwaves on BBC Radio Lancashire. Ross McWilliam, life coach, is with us on the evening programme tonight. Life coach Ross McWilliam is with us. Ross, thanks very much for your time this Wednesday evening. We were talking before, and you were saying almost the need to have ownership over the situation, to almost embrace it, learn to cherish it. And I'm wondering, because you say that, do you think it's good for us all to get out of our comfort zone now and again?
Yeah, and the sad fact is that some people get very comfortable in an uncomfortable zone. And that's the sad thing about life. And maybe then we get older and we have regrets. And I certainly don't want to get older and have regrets about anything. So pushing and nudging myself and enjoying the process, the destination is going to take care of itself if I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Is it an age thing? I think back to, 4 or 5 years at secondary school, then at college, and if going away to university or first job, and you seem to pack an awful lot of life and changes into 3 or 4 years. And as you get older, maybe there isn't so much change.
No, that's an interesting thing. I think things come at you from different directions when you're younger, and it's more like survival rather than thriving. But I think you pick things up as you go along, and you start working out how you best perform. And I talked to a guy many years ago called Jay Cross, who was the world memory expert. And he gave me a few tips that I've used ever since. And I don't think that, it's totally not massively intelligent, but they actually make a lot of sense. So I'll give you an example of one. He said when you revise for something, we would do the power hour. So 20 minutes revision, 5 minutes testing, and then 5-minute rest. So after the 5-minute rest, we go back into 20 minutes revision, 5 minutes testing what you've just learned, then last 5 minutes what you learned half an hour ago. And this power hour is very powerful, especially if you do it with what I call a study buddy to test you on it. And he said you don't have to put hours and hours aside, because that thought of putting hours aside puts people off. And he was the world memory expert, and he could do things within an hour. And it was phenomenal what he could achieve through that hour.
There is the theory behind all of this, but actually it's the practical application of it. And because you've had setbacks, and these have helped you, haven't they?
Yeah, I think if it wasn't for the setbacks, I wouldn't be out on your show today. So I think you can take something from every situation you experience. You see it as a threat, or you see it as an opportunity. And again, the older I get, the more I see opportunities in life. I remember when I was at my university in Leeds, and we had a stats exam to do. And I previously failed maths at school, and I was very nervous about it at that time. But I decided to see it as an opportunity. So I got a friend of mine to show me what to do each week after lessons. He prepared me, we planned it, he tested me. And at the end of the exam, I came third and he came 6 out of 50 people. So that proves to me that most people can apply themselves, the right support, the right guidance, with the right, here's the word, why power, the why reason, not just the motivation, the why reason, you can achieve.
If, let's say, I had an exam in a fortnight, and normal times, my usual attitude to that would be an encroaching sense of dread. How do I say halt? How do I put a freeze on that straight away in order to let some positivity in?
You've got the pressure of timescale there. Two weeks before an exam, you're on the back foot, and you'll probably think that as well. So the first thing you've got to do really is stop that adrenaline and cortisol flooding in and taking over the campus. So it won't let you remember and it won't let you focus. So maybe some exercises around confidence building and self-esteem. Recognize and remembering your self-esteem, your self-worth. And that could be as simple as just identifying evidence in the past where you've done well under pressure. Whether it's exam, in a sports pitch, or in music, you can pick that evidence up. And that gives you a platform to say, hey, you know what? I'm all right at this. In fact, you know what? I'm better than all right. I'm going somewhere with it.
Some people, I'm thinking back to school, and it's like, oh, they're just good at exams. And I wonder if they were, or if they were just better at dealing with it. And I suppose what I'm saying is that some of the terms we use here maybe keep us a little bit down under the thumb, don't we? We talk of stress, we talk of pressure, and we need these things in our life, but we should really be talking about adrenaline, like you say, and a showcase.
Yeah. I'm going back to your first part of that question. Is it genetics? Is it environment? Is it a combination? I'm sure there's something to play there, but there's a big part that we can do ourselves, irrespective of genetics and upbringing. And I think you're right to focus on terms. I was reading an article last week about stress from Stanford University, and it said what we need to do with stress, we need to look at it differently. Stress actually can be our friend. Stress is a stepping stone for improvement, performance, and career enhancement and jobs and opportunities. Your relationship with stress, if you see it as very negative as a threat, it will become that. So you've got to embrace it, put your arm around it, and work with it together.
Well, I've got to say, it's been fascinating. Thank you for your time, Ross, this evening. I'm sure a lot of people listening will have taken a few of the strands that you've mentioned along the way and make it work for them in the future, because it is horrible, isn't it? That feeling, just feeling fearful about something. And if we can relearn ourselves, re-educate ourselves to look at it differently, we can liberate ourselves along the way, I guess.
Yeah, the final word on this is, I'll pinch it from Brené Brown, the social researcher. Just be brave, you know. Just go out there, prepare as well as you can, enjoy that process. And by that process, you'll move on to your next level. We do know for sure if we don't try it, we won't get it. So embrace it and be brave.
Have a great evening. Ross, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Brett.
Ross McWilliam there, a life coach, so much more as well. Speaking live with us here on the evening programme. It's Wednesday night, 25 to 8.